The story of all this is about Bob Marley. The book is called 5 Lives Remembered, and it has never been published. No, I don't know if it ever will be because the things I've discovered have been powerful and different. I don't know if that needs to be published or not. But it was the story of our beginning, and it is mentioned in several of my other books and writers' conferences. I want to know what to do with it. I tell them because often that one book may not be the one that's published. Sometimes, a publisher will like your style of writing, but then he'll ask, "Do you have anything else?" And if all you have is just one book, what are you going to do? Tell them that's all you have? With me, anyway, the first book was never published. Even though I tried and sent it out to many places, I thought it was unique. What we found was that the way of life has taken a turn. Anyway, that was the first book. But during that time, I had to forget all about hypnosis, reincarnation, and all these adventures because I had to rebuild my life. Everything was completely turned upside down. I had been given the responsibility of the family because my husband went into a very dark place. But he didn't want anything to do with anyone, and he really cut out a lot of his family as he went inward. His life was over, he thought his career was over. Everything can change, it took him many years to read. But during that time, I was busy taking care of him and raising my family. So all about the adventures in hypnosis had to go on the back burner. Well, I did all of this living in the country, trying to raise a garden. Now, I say it's like I've lived many lives in this one life because I've had so many twists and turns along the way. My life is over, my children are grown, they're out of the house. My life is over. Go off to a totally new, open to something you would never even imagine, and it could be totally different than what happened to me. I could have ever imagined. It was about 10 years anyway before I was able to really get back into this. That happened when all of my kids were beginning to leave home. They were getting married, they were going off to college. It's what you call the empty nest syndrome. And it was like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? The empty nest syndrome. What to do is not what the average mother or grandmother decided to do. I wanted to get back into hypnosis, I wanted to get back into what I was doing. It was like a door had been opened, suddenly just slammed shut, and I knew there was something else there. And that was what I wanted to get. About that time, I knew there had to be easier ways of doing hypnosis. The old ways were too long, drawn out, too time-consuming. I knew there had to be an easier way. So, I began to study the newer methods. 30 years ago, that's how long I've been active now in past life regression. It's been 30 years ago. It was at the end of the 70s when I began to get into and study the new techniques of imagery and visualization. It's not done by watching a shiny object or a long, drawn-out induction or the tests that are performed by so many. Now it's much easier. Then I began to apply them. Huntsville is the closest Olive Garden on top of a mountain in the middle of nowhere out here, with peace and serenity. Spelled, it only has 2,000 people. There's only 10,000 people in the entire county because it's mostly composed of the National Forest. The biggest city is 28 miles away, which is Fayetteville. But people said, where in the world did I find all these people that I've written about in my book? That was what Jeanette shows. There must have been a sense of destiny, a reason why all of these things began to happen, why we were put in this position. Now, I know things happen, but they're supposed to happen, and you can't fight it anyway. At that time, I didn't know what was going on. The people began to come to me, and they just wanted to. In those days, I didn't charge anything because I was just experimenting, seeing what was going to go on. They began going into interesting past lives. I was not so much into the therapy part at that time as I was trying to discover. As I said earlier, I'm not a psychic and I don't channel. I consider myself the investigator, the researcher of. Because I soon found the material I was just kidding from these different people that just came from nowhere to my house, and the group service was going to it too. I used to go to metaphysical. I soon found the information I was getting was not normal. I was getting what I've called this has been what I've done ever since the whole 30. Information that's either been lost, forgotten, or never known in the first place. And this is what I bring back to our time, so I with the lost information, and that's what I work. I try to do it anyway, bring back to our time at these people. We have to go back into very interesting past lives, and I know the skeptics are always saying the person will be Cleopatra or Napoleon's voice, somebody famous. I have never found this, and I belong to different hypnosis groups now, and I don't know any other hypnotist who has found this either. Hey, we found many of the lives have been very dull, boring, and normal. You've got to remember there are a whole lot more normal people out there, common people, ordinary people than those that are famous. How many people in the world today get their names in the newspaper? Are there still people that can identify them? The majority of people are just ordinary people, living ordinary lives, digging potatoes, because that's maybe the most interesting thing they do. They live in the country, they're farmers, and they just have very little happening in a life like that, even though it's hard to find anything that is even. But this makes it more and more valid because this is the way most people's lives are. My job is to find out why they were shown that life and what it has to do with their lives now. The reason why that one life was, and usually in my work now, it will show something connecting with the at this time. I began to develop my own technique of hypnosis, and it's different. I keep thinking now, after 30 years of using this technique, of protecting, specializing in it, and holding it and working out all of the bugs. I keep saying someone somewhere had to learn hypnosis in the first place. Somebody had to figure out how to do this. Now that doesn't mean their method is the air tech, is the only way it can be done. This is the way you do it. Don't make any deviations, don't make any corrections, do it word for word. I've had some people tell me they have to read from a script, and they cannot deviate from it. They can't use their own mind as far as coming up with the ideas of how to do this. The main thing is once you understand what it's doing, how you're working with the mind, how you're working with, as long as you, and the main thing is you're not going to hurt the person. You're free to experiment. It is very different because I found a way to contact the subconscious mind directly and to have access to tremendous amounts of information. That is the technique that I use. Now there are many levels of, they used to be measured, they can be measured by machines to see the different levels of. The person will get information if you take them into a past life, they will get information. Hundreds and hundreds of lives, they're going to get something. They feel they're watching it and not a participant, but more or less watching it happen. The conscious mind is very active, and it's, oh, you're making all this up. You know you read it in a book, you saw it in a movie, silly, what do you think you're doing? Until afterwards, they have a lot of doubt about it because they said they remembered everything about it in an objective. These are the lighter levels of, is the deepest possible level of. They don't remember anything. When they wake up, they will say, oh, I must have fallen asleep, I don't remember. And they think they were only asleep for just 15 minutes at the most, and they travel back the way I do to take them back. I call it time travel, like going through a time tunnel. We are actually traveling back to that time. If you go back into two realistic levels, the person becomes the other personality, this life disappears. They have no memory of this life at all, they are the other personality. If you were to bring up an object or anything that's in our time period but does not exist in their time period, they don't even know what you're talking about, and you have to explain what. An example is many of the clients I've had, if they go back to the Middle Ages and driving something, and I say it's a glass, they don't know what glass is. And trying to explain something that is so simple to us, simple ordinary objects, explain that to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about. It's hard to see off the top of your head, but they become the other personality so much they are able to get all of the history, the feeling, anything that the person of that time was associated with. Of course, listen to know something they can't tell. The farmer in the field is not going to know what the king in the palace knows. So even though he became the person, sometimes the information is very dull and boring because there's nothing there, it's just a simple life. And they become this personality, and that is the level that I like to work at. Unusually, a lot of people think hypnosis, because they don't understand what it is, and of course, the movies and the TV haven't helped. Hypnotized. It's absolutely impossible for you to stay in the wide awake. You will go in and out all these different altered states. Today, because this is the way the mind functions, alpha, which is the lightest level, beta is the one that you're in whenever you are supposedly awake, and also is for you to enter in the lightest level, cause it kind of shuts things out, in and out all the time. Hypnosis that people don't realize, and you're driving down the road, and you're still intent on that yellow line, but you don't even remember passing certain landmarks. This is called road hypnosis. Another way is if you're in an office, and you wouldn't have to learn how to shut out all the noise around you to concentrate on your job, you enter and close all these. And also, if you're in church or at a lecture and you begin to doze off, you're also entering an altered state. They have proved that it is absolutely impossible for you to stay in the wide-awake beta state anytime you watch TV. If you're reading a book, you get so involved in it that you're feeling the emotions, and you're laughing and crying with the book or the movie, and someone can walk into the room, and you don't even pay attention to them, you have entered an altered state at that time also. What's the weather? What experiment they did, they hooked people with her brain to the TV set. They said the TV set will only stay on as long as you are wide awake. I know I'm wide awake whenever I watch TV, nobody could keep the TV on for more than 60 seconds. That's how quickly you enter the altered. Once you become focused on something like and you know the people who programs, especially the people who commercials, know that I know that you are in an altered state when you're watching the TV. And during that time, subliminal suggestions can be put into your mind, etc., prescription. It's all subliminally aimed at the part of your mind that is very suggestible when you're watching the television. I totally get a drink of water or something so we don't have to be there and be influenced that way. You are in and out of the hypnosis level all day long. You cannot be in the wide-awake state of the mind and use it for therapy. And that is what I do. But the hypnosis level is the deep, it's down around theta after alpha, beta, the next step beyond that is delta, and that is when you fall asleep, and you are asleep. You do this twice during the. You have to do it. You enter this in ambulance level. You enter it at night when you're falling asleep and when you're waking up in the morning. You are in, and that is a synonym for stick level because the next is falling asleep, and then coming from state, that is the sanable. That is the level that I use that I like to work with. The technique that I developed, the conscious mind and jabbering at you trying to get you to listen, besides sitting here watching you trying to be quiet like this, you know how different things you need to be doing. I guess it doesn't like to be ignored, so you start these, it will search ever. It was very important for the hypnotist to remove that conscious mind interference, push it aside, push it out of the way so that it cannot interfere with what we're doing. An ambulance contacting the subconscious mind directly, we can have access, and we can actually have therapy help cure the person. Ailments, diseases, illness, I've had a great deal of success, and we can find the answers to most of their problems by removing the conscious mind interference and taking them. So that is what I've developed, a way of doing. A person will go into a sauna ambulance stick level when you're doing the hypnosis. Anabolistic level would be 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 people will just automatically do it, but with the technique that I developed, it's the other way around. 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 30 will not go into sanable. Is the amount of valuable information you can get that way low that they remove the conscious mind interference, and I believe that what I've discovered is very valuable and very important. I've been doing this hypnosis now with the past life therapy and the past life regression. I've been doing it now for 30 years. I have worked with 10,000s of people all over the world. Narrator was work of the devil, that it was demons possessing the person, that there was no such thing as reincarnation. And I don't know where he was coming from, but I figure there's a lot of fear there and ignorance because they have not done their research. But out of these thousands and thousands of people, I have yet to find anyone who has not had a past life somewhere sometime. So I think that should be enough if you want that reincarnation is real. But you know what they say, no about a proof will ever be enough for a true skeptic, and a believer does not need any proof. But I have had wonderful cases and wonderful adventures that I know, if you do, and many of them, oh thank you, and everyday life show me it's real because I know it because I have no doubt at all with the people, there's plenty of validation back me. What are the books I'm working on? Just finished a new book, and it's part of the Counselor to the Universe series. But what the books are working on 3 at the same time. Whichever book is finished first is the next. Is it supposed to be, but one of the books that I'm working on its history as it really was because I'm finding out what has come down to us through the history book. It's not really exactly the way history happened, that is what I'm focusing on, trying to get back history by comparing what people say. I'm working on 2, so I know I'm going to be writing for Ready. I'm not finished by that is what I'm doing now is teaching this technique in the beginning. You know the psychiatrist and psychologist, the people who were the audience, that old past life regression is just for new, there isn't anything really to it. But now, as we've been going on for many years and finding out what you can actually do with these prince levels and with past life regression, they are learning how to do it. They said it doesn't matter if they believe in reincarnation or not if it helps for the patient, that is repertoire of the things that they could do and to affect more and more people. And I'm now teaching my technique all over the world, and I've had psychiatrists who come and take my classes, it's spreading, and things are happening.